All right, ladies and gentlemen, the lecture is on. I'd like to just, you can't go wrong by starting with cats and dogs. Although admittedly, this is the cuter cat. His name is Schnuffles because, anyway, long story. Um, Someone pointed out that, it's kind of cool and they wish they had a small army of things staring at them to intimidate and guilt them into being productive. Um, As far as I'm concerned, this is what a proper army in this case should look like. I'm just getting some messages in. I want to see if we're having some streaming problems. Um, so this, we'll see if things clean out. Professor Sheridan is monitoring our video quality. What I want to point out is it's not the size of the army that necessarily matters, it's the composition and training of its members. So a combination of Marvin, Tesla, and a duck to ask questions to may be more important than a mass group. So taking us back in time, 2 lectures ago, we spoke about how to consult and appropriate ways of consulting and how to set things up so that you feel consulted. That process is in play. We've had a lot, so this is the discourse thread on the process. I just want to highlight pretty solid numbers there. We're doing pretty well, but I do want to just exercise some caution. 134 views isn't bad. But generally speaking, whether it's now on Mattermost, whether it's in Discord, Discourse, we're seeing about half the class. So we are worried about representation. To those of you who participated, awesome discussion, very professional, very much in keeping with the way we've tried to set Praxis up. So really happy about that. For those of you who are curious, some we passed up the chain, some of your concerns around teamwork, around best of. Some of them were incorporated, all were read. And again, I don't think we're going to end up in a situation where we have 100% agreement, but we certainly want to emphasize that we are trying to take things into account. So thank you for those who brought your points forward. Also keep in mind, this is Praxis. Some of you are worried that there's work that's been done that may not be incorporated into what's going forward. But I think it's important to work with studio teaching team and overall teaching team on that. So this announcement came out last night, announcing the vote, and it's already in play, and people keep moving. It will close tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 20 hours Eastern Daylight Time. But what I want to talk about right now is the other part, and that would be, where's my highlight? That would be the stuff that happened here. Because of the way we set things up, I wasn't really in a position to do my usual drop-ins, but I heard some really cool things. And some of you put them in the shared photo album, which is great. So, I kind of love this, very simple, very straightforward, using whatever was around. Looks like a hot glue gun involved. But the neat thing is, I'm looking at this going, there's something up here. There's a design feature, a design concept that this representation, not necessarily to scale, certainly low fidelity, but it's trying to show something. And the next photo that we have access to shows that the idea is, if you're in control of all the furniture, you don't have to be limited to what you think a table is. Tables can have cutouts, and those cutouts can be sized to other aspects of your workout or other items in your workspace. So it really gets the point across that, hey, if we take ownership and reconceive of what a table is, you can do something really cool. So I love that. This was kind of neat. Again, just taking what was around. Someone had a bunch of mirrors or was able to get a bunch of mirrors in play. I'm going to assume this is for the record project, but I'm not sure. But again, I can get a feel for using what's at hand in order to gain a representation. I should apologize. I'm looking at my watch because I think there's an Amber Alert going out and it keeps buzzing me. And this is how we're communicating as a teaching team. A QR code. And I'll be honest, I kind of thought, okay, this is a team who's just trying to show that a QR code could work. I'm guessing it's for the Art Gallery of Ontario navigation. But then I actually trained my phone on it, and it turns out that that team has thrown together something on Wix and is sort of giving a demonstration as to what's possible with the technologies they had. Now, they have the advantage that this is an online digital realm. But nonetheless, it still worked out really well. We have, a pencil, some, could be toilet paper, could be paper towel, an arm and a record. So we've got something going on here. Again, I'd need to know more. And this may be from this team or maybe from another team, but now we have what appears to be some image processing, and you can kind of see how it's working. So different ideas, different representations. Another one on records, and I'm feeling that these might be similar mirrors to last time. But what I love, absolutely love, is if you look at how they put that together, it's balancing on an interesting angle using erasers. So I apologize that you had to sacrifice, or you chose to sacrifice some erasers to the cause, but it's actually kind of neat because the erasers provide enough friction, I think, to hold it in place, are easily tailored or are easily cut in shape. So it's really kind of a nice use of what's available. Totally cool. Foam core. Loving the foam core. Curved foam core. We don't usually get that in what we do, which is kind of great. But if you don't want to do foam core and you have some skills in 3D solid modeling or in CAD, you can start to go there. And we're going to try to talk about that a little bit later. And then we have sort of pure code. And so I was looking at this, trying to figure out what was going on. And what I suddenly realized is this team has coded something up that allows you to take a photo of the descriptor of some artwork, because pretty much in the AGO, a lot of artwork comes with descriptors. And then they're using some image processing work that I don't know how it works, but they hopefully will tell us. And they're telling us that, if given that photo, we're fairly certain your artwork is in this room, and they're giving a confidence level. And I think that's really a nice feature. This idea of saying, we're not just going to do the math and tell you true or false. We're going to allow you to make the decision on confidence, which is a nice piece of communication. Hand sketching, hand drawings, process elements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, drawing out what's going to happen. Really nice, love it. Slightly different way of depicting a process. Good use of the things you want to be doing. Love that there's a legend, helps us understand the notion of side view and top view. So you're doing different views. Really a nice, are these perfect engineering drawings? No, I mean, I could point out all sorts of little things, but they're great for their context and their purpose. And I really want to emphasize this, and we'll talk about this again in a few minutes. It's using what you have to accomplish what you need with enough value and fidelity that it's a good payoff. And then, so happy. Physics, math, good stuff. And again, am I personally in a position to decide or validate, or I guess verify in this case, whether the math was done correctly? I'll be honest, I'm not. Oh, but Professor Vutha would be. So if you could get your math Vutha approved, stamped by Vutha, or other appropriate prof, that would be awesome. But the fact that you're starting to say, hey, I can take stuff from my other courses and apply them in my verification is totally what we're looking for. So if I kind of zoom out a little bit, I want to give absolute props to the class as a whole. Because all of these, every one of these can support your engineering design activities, whether it's hand sketches, whether it's popsicle sticks and Q-tips, whether it's a Wix site, whether it's solid modeling. But here's the thing I want to bring back, and I want to really, really, really emphasize, because some of you are really in very, very restricted environments, and you're like, look, I might have paper for a little longer, and I'm running out of pencil. This other stuff I just don't have. And what I want to really put on the table is the mentality of an engineering designer, balancing this idea of let's get better tools, let's get better equipment, let's get better simulation, versus using what you have in a better way. And you might remember this from something we did a long time ago when we said, look, back in Praxis 1 Lecture 24, there's intrinsic skill and extrinsic resources. And when your extrinsic resources are limited, like they are for many of you, it becomes a matter of intrinsic skill and saying, how do I, as the designer, given what I do have, how can I use it to make the arguments I'm looking for, which is super awesome. So keep that in mind as we look at the rest of today. We're going to talk a little bit about device DFX in the context of medical devices. Learning in, and I'm putting isolation in quotes because there's a lot of different aspects to the question of how your current situations are that you want to get to. Hopefully, one pagers as well. If the topic doesn't work on one pagers, the material will be in the slides, and we'll talk to it on Monday because we're already about 10 minutes in, and we want to make sure that our guest Melissa Fernandez gets enough time. So, forgot to take that out. So I want to go to something that I don't know if any of you have seen. It came out in 2003, and it's called The Prisoner's Inventions. And it talks about everything from how to cook a grilled cheese sandwich in a locker, and as it says, to chill a soda using a toilet. Now, before I go on, let me be very, very clear. We are not saying that your current circumstances are like being in prison. We are in no way insinuating that. However, what we are saying is that when you have constraints, they can promote innovation. Every one of you was operating when things beforehand were operating under certain constraints, and you're operating under different constraints now. And those constraints can really provide an impetus and can really promote innovative thought. So unfortunately, this book is not easily acquired in PDF form. That's not a challenge. Um, but if you do Google prisoners' inventions and look for images, there's a lot of stuff that comes up. And I'm just going to pick a slightly different one. And yes, in some cases, there's the negative connotation of weapons, and people laugh at the idea that, oh, in prison, everyone is trying to make weapons. But that's not necessarily the whole story by any stretch. The individuals who are in prison are trying to create things out of what they have, which is very limited, that allow them to maintain the quality and standards of life that they're hoping for. Whether that's for cooking, whether that's for personal hygiene, whether that's for cleaning. There's some really great stuff. The other place you can look for information on this is from World War II. I don't have slides queued up for this, and it was what prisoners of war developed. And they were literally making radios by balancing on two pencil leads a razor blade. And if you know enough about electricity and you know enough about radio, you can actually receive signal that way. So it's really fascinating just what's possible under these highly restrictive situations. I said I wasn't going to compare this to your current environments, but I will point out that some of you are in situations that are quite limited in terms of the nature of applying heat. And one of your classmates, for reasons I don't know, was able to acquire a high speed or a high temperature desoldering station and was able to use that desoldering station to make a cup of tea. Now, I will say, now that we know about this, as student engineers, safety continues to be, for yourself, your environment, and the public, critical. We also want you to manage risk and to do design work, not just hack things. So props for innovation, props for overcoming constraints, not just with respect to making this cup of tea, but also for beta. I will say, and I did tweet this for those of you who are on Twitter, we were incredibly impressed with what you were able to accomplish, especially your abilities to present your accomplishments in a very difficult situation. So this is the time in my 150 when we start clapping and everybody's just like, yes, we did a good thing, and we want to really, really emphasize that there was a lot of positives. Wasn't across the board. There's always going to be challenges, but there's lots more course to go for those who did experience a little bit of a result that they don't think is indicative of their abilities. So now I'm going to ask you. I finally come to you because I've been doing a lot of talking. Here we have two types of mask, and we're going to give you 90 seconds or so, and we're going to ask you identify some design for usability issues with these products. And I've given you a bit of a hint, looking specifically at the attachments to the human, between the human and the mask. But take about a minute, 90 seconds, design for usability issues with these products. Go. I'm just going to check on my team, make sure things are okay. Okay. All right. I've been given a signal that we need to make sure our guest gets in. So let me just do a quick look here. Da, 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 da. Okay. Uh, Ear loops heard after some time. Totally. Two hands to put them on. Awesome. What if they don't have ears? Cool. The notion of having to pinch the bridge, and I think that refers to the fact that on the one over here, you are expected to pinch. Um, I'll just change the picture slightly just to see how they're intended to be used. Two hands, not sanitary put on, fitted, really annoying to wear. Need to go a little bit further. Facial size, love it. Oh, those of you who have ever done snorkeling or scuba diving, I really struggle with putting things on. Size, glasses, perfect. All right. So what I wanted to show, and this because Twitter is full of stuff now, is this. So so the major note thing that I was focusing on, because they're both covering the nose, they're both covering the face, is this versus that. And this idea that, one uses the ear and one uses the whole head. And so I'll put on the table, and maybe this is unfair, these companies did verification in idealized circumstance, possibly with professional models. You put it on, it works well, it's great. But when you're in situ, in the field, wearing these things all day, now you're validating. So it's kind of a really important thing to think about. Um, on the right-hand side, sure, probably not a huge deal. On the left-hand side, big deal. And then you design around the challenges. So lots of things are coming up about how engineers are helping to fight the pandemic. We have everything from 3D printed parts, which I think personally, I'm cool with this, cool in the sense of as an engineering design instructor with a lot of opinions. If there's missing parts, you can get the specs part. The part is not, shall we say, in direct contact with the patient and can largely be seen of as, and not in, it's core to the function, but not necessarily core to the medical certification. I'm okay. We have the snorkeling mask ventilator. Again, a group of individuals from a makerspace doing a little bit of a hack on an existing product. I think it's a little bit, shall we say, grandiose to call it into ventilator. So I'm going to go to something that got a little more press. I'm going to dig into one of those 11. Engineers made a DIY face shield. Now it's helping doctors. Let's walk this through because it gives a bit of a story. So, director of engineering design at University of Wisconsin-Madison gets an urgent email. After putting his kids to bed, he went to Home Depot, grabbed supplies, and went for it. Oh boy. And some foam mannequins. So I'm looking at this going, seriously? Like you literally just grabbed some stuff, did make some low fidelity prototypes, and then presented it to his wife. So conveniently, he had at hand, because his wife was an anesthesiologist, some early validation. So my grr at this individual for immediately grabbing before thinking, maybe uncalled for. Um, Lighter prototypes with friends. You got the iterative aspect. So you've got a bunch of good pieces here, and then you start to get more feedback. But literally talk to the group through infection control videos, and so you got some proxies. The thing that kind of kills me is they haven't actually ever looked or used, like they haven't touched or used the actual visor. Okay, but let's see what happens. So collaborating, very similar to what you've been having to do, which is fair. Um, finally managed to get one that could be measured and disassembled. Um, and again, all of a sudden noticing, wait a minute, it's not just about covering the face, it's also about being lightweight. So now the reference design becomes super, super critical. Last but not least, little change. Originally there was some cutouts. Now they got rid of the cutouts for manufacturing. There's a design for X right there, and this notion that, look, we're going for good, not perfect. We got to ship something. Last but not least, the notion of leveraging experts. So when I was reading through this with my engineering design instructor hat on, I'm like, you didn't have a reference design. You immediately went out and started. You didn't consult with any stakeholders in advance. Ugh, I'm not feeling so good. But high speed iteration, access through the spouse, so not super bad. But let's look at something even a little more in depth, and that was a little hard cut. Mechanical ventilator, the MVM, designed for mass scale production. You'll note this is from Italy that got hit pretty hard, although there is some international collaboration. Canada's in there. And what I want to start by saying is ventilators are trivial. I mean, this is the conceptual design of a ventilator. This is like the equivalent, a little more so, than the conceptual design of there's my bridge. This is a little more detailed, but fundamentally, we're not doing anything too hard here. So if you dig in, it talks about these new rapidly manufactured ventilator system guidelines. So this is from the UK, which is cool. And that the MVM does what it has to do. It delivers pressure at the appropriate, delivers the appropriate amount of pressure, does the appropriate matching of human breathing. So excellent. It functions as a ventilator. It does ventilating. However, let's talk about what they say are the actual important parts. Simplicity of operation, number of components, ease of procurement, ease of construction, cost containment, ease of deployment, customizability, scalability, reliability. So the reason I'm showing you this is because there's a real temptation, especially with maker culture now, to say, we got it working, we've done good work. And hopefully by now you get the idea that, look, functional requirements are mostly necessary. Sometimes you can drop a few, but they're in no way sufficient for good design, for success in the marketplace, for manufacture, as you saw before, or for changing the world. So we really want to emphasize in this moment, we have all these people who are really trying hard to support the medical community, each other. We're really trying to put ourselves out there. But a lot of people are focusing on, I made a thing that moves air. I made a thing that protects the face. And that's important. I am not taking away that it's important. It's the DFXs, it's the non-functional, it's the manufacture and the scalability and the customizability. That's what's going to allow your thing to go from, well, I'll wear it for a couple minutes, but I've already got a migraine, through to, this is the best mask I've ever worn. I can wear it all day. So DFXs matter. And you've got a few more weeks to think about that, especially when you start looking at the detailed design decisions you're making. I will put out a total prop, and we're just about on time to switch to Flatten. This is from Shrey Jain, who is one of your classmates. Flatten has a website they've been putting together on real-time information regarding COVID-19. It's been, I believe, getting a lot of press and a lot of good play, and is also ideally, and behind that is not just pleasant play, but quality, and I think it's there. Let's look at the team. Shrey Jain from your class. The name Martin Stadekar rings a bell. Jeffrey Hinton on the right, certainly nice to have someone of that scale. And I believe Arthur Alshire is also in your class. So I want to do a total shout out and props to these individuals for their work, for where they're going. And basically to say, we hope you're doing praxis to it. There's a lot of opportunity here for stuff to go in your handbook. function and DFX. And for those of you who are working on activities like this, let us know, because we want to share. We want to show how, as engineers and even student engineers, you can give back. All right, so we're 25 minutes in, which is a little about halfway through. We asked you in homework, what are the components of your life that are more or less under your control? And we haven't picked that up yet. We are going to try to, after we introduce you to U of T's engineering learning strategist, Melissa Fernandez. As you can see here, she's taking appointments with students over Microsoft Teams. You should have hopefully heard about her through a number of mechanisms. And she's going to take, perhaps the rest of lecture, but a good solid 20 minutes or so, just to talk about how you, in your current circumstance, can continue to learn, continue to stay motivated, continue to thrive in your academics, and possibly even beyond your academics. So we're going to transition to her slides in a moment, and I'm really hoping that Professor Sheridan and Melissa are able to pull this off, or they're going to tell me if I need to stop presenting.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm going to try to switch over to my application now, and we'll see how this works.
Foster, you have to stop sharing first.
I have to stop sharing?
Yeah.
Foster is not sharing.
Okay. Let's see. Oh.
Okay, Twitch people, I'm going to be doing a little bit of fast maneuvering.
For some reason, it's not sharing my... It's not sharing something, but I think I can make this work.
Everybody hang tight, and if you have any questions in Mattermost, we will continue to answer them there as we figure stuff out.
Sorry, that would be my dog.
These things happen. All right, come on, you. The joys of tech. Discord.
How does this
Bingo.
look?
Looking good to, well, we're getting there. We're I'm going to leave my teaching team as I work on, oh, yeah, we go. I see it. Melissa, awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So is this it? Is this good? Can I start?
Yep, please.
Perfect. So thanks everyone for hanging in there with me. And thanks Jason, Patricia, Robert, and Penny for inviting me to your class to chat about adapting to this new learning environment. It definitely is pretty much just an engineering problem. I think that engineers, from what I've learned about you folks so far, is that you're really good at solving problems. And I think this one that we're faced against is just another problem for us to solve. And I really liked how, Jason, you were saying how we're doing it with the things that are in our environments to the best of our ability. And so really my section of content is going to follow suit in this way. So hello, my name is Melissa Fernandez. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns, and I'm really here to help you study smarter, not necessarily harder, as you transition to online learning. And as Jason mentioned, you can book a one-on-one appointment with me through the engineering advising portal, and the short link to that is uft.me/eng-advising portal, and that is case sensitive, so be sure to put the E, the A, and the P all caps. And what I'm hoping to cover in today's session is really based around 5 tips for online learning in our current context of being amidst COVID-19. So what we're going to go through is we're going to talk about finding the right space, making a schedule, preparing for your online lectures, engaging in your online class, and also seeking help when you need it. And so transitioning to new learning routines, it's going to mean that you're going to have to get yourself in the right space. And by space, I'm talking about virtual space, physical space, and also mental space. So let's begin by talking about virtual space. So you can set yourself up virtually by ensuring that you have access to a reliable internet connection. And if you don't, this is something that you should communicate to your academic advisor because they'll work with you to explore some of the options that might be available to you. It's also important to figure out where your lectures and coursework are located, in addition to when they're going to be released and how long they're going to be accessible for. And if your class is using any new or unfamiliar software like Blackboard Collaborate, you want to make sure that you're able to access that platform and that you know how to use the different components of that platform. And finally, now that you're in online classes, you don't really have anyone sitting next to you so that you can just turn to them to ask for clarifications. So more than ever before, it's going to be important to stay connected to your peers in online discussion groups. And you might find Quarkus to be really helpful for this, or you might also want to consider creating these spaces outside of Quarkus and Blackboard, just because you might find it more helpful to have streamlined conversations in WhatsApp, or possibly creating a Slack, or even using something like Facebook Messenger. Having a physical space is also really helpful as well. So having a physical space to work at that's other than your bed is a great idea at this point. And this is because you don't want your body to confuse your awake and working times with your asleep and resting times. And so if the only spaces in your house that are available to you are shared with others, it's important to communicate your needs around the ways that you wish to share that space. These conversations might need to include things like your preferences around noise levels, distractions, meal times, and other stuff. I'm sure that a lot of you have had to make the move from your current living space, which may have been closer to campus, to a space that's maybe even across the world at this point. When you do find a good space, when you're getting set up, make sure that you keep everything that you need nearby. So your notebooks, your pens, your water, etc. And when you're in that space, don't forget to take some breaks away from your space as well. So this includes getting away from your screen. And what we know about the science behind taking breaks is that there is a bit of a hierarchy, with social media breaks being less effective than those that get you away from your screen. For the best type of break, the secret is that you need to try to get yourself into doing something that gets your heart pumping. And so something like jumping jacks, or a dance party in your wheelchair, or maybe even a jog around the block are all good things that will help you to bounce back after a break and be even more productive than you were before that break. And finding the right space mentally, it is a little bit challenging, especially during this time. Online learning under normal circumstances is known to create challenges for staying on task and staying motivated and staying focused. And amidst everything that's going on in the world right now, this could be even more challenging. So you can try to get into the right space mentally with new strategies for staying focused and motivated, while also trying to mitigate any stress and coping with the stresses that are presenting. So you could try to get into the right mental space by doing some of the following. You can engage your focus mode of thinking by using the Pomodoro technique. So that's that technique where you have 25 minutes of work and a 5-minute break. You can create an incentive system where you can reward yourself for finishing tasks. You can try to remind yourself of why you chose U of T engineering, why you chose NSI, why you chose the courses that you're in. You might want to also set up an accountability structure. So that means like asking your friends, family, or even your advisors, your academic advisors, to hold you accountable for overcoming your urges to procrastinate. You can try to find a balance with all the things that are happening on social media and in the news right now by staying tuned in, but knowing when to take a breather. Because while staying informed is really helpful, too much information may not add an extra benefit for you either. Something that you can try also is to think back to what has worked to manage stress and anxiety in the past, and maybe with some modifications, you can rely on some of these as well. And finally, something that's really important is to stay connected to others. So maybe try to arrange some virtual dates with your friends to catch up, to share your concerns, and even just to like listen and validate some of their feelings. If you're feeling that stress is getting in the way of your daily activities for several days in a row, it is important to consider chatting with some of the folks at My SSP or Good to Talk or Health and Wellness or even your healthcare provider. So My SSP is an online app that has counseling services in over 146 different languages, both over the phone and by text. Good to Talk is a counseling helpline where you can chat with someone who is a trained counselor. Health and Wellness does still have appointments. They are taking them virtually at the moment. And so I'd call in to find out a little bit more about that. And your healthcare provider, most healthcare providers at this point are going to online sourcing, online appointments. So you can try to contact your healthcare providers. If you're looking for more strategies to maintain your mental wellness during the COVID-19 pandemic, CAMH has also come out with a great online site as well. And so just by Googling CAMH, CAMH, mental health and COVID-19, you might find some really great resources there. So that concludes the finding the right space piece. Let's move on to making a schedule. And really, right now, it can feel like you're only accountable to yourself. And that's why, for this reason, it's usually easier to put off going to classes and completing your assignments. And you might find it harder to even get out of your PJs or stick to a consistent sleep and wake schedule. And so one way to counter this would be to make a schedule and try to stick to it. So it's important to determine when you're feeling the most motivated and productive and schedule around these times. I also recommend attending your classes at their scheduled time if it's possible for you in the time zone that you're in. And this way you can avoid falling behind on your lectures. One thing that you can try in terms of scheduling is to map out your next 3 weeks using SMART goals. And this means that everything that goes into your calendar needs to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. So be sure to schedule in your classes, your upcoming assignments, and the milestones that you need to be at to ensure it's accomplished on time. And be sure to also schedule in time to study towards your final exams and also your final assessments. And other things that you might want to consider putting in as well are things like staying updated with your class announcements and your emails, and maybe even your morning routine if this is something that's causing a problem for you. So if you're sitting here and watching this in your pajamas, maybe this one's for you. And something that you could also do is put some breaks into your day and schedule those in intentionally. The third thing that I wanted to chat with you about is preparing for your online lectures. And so learning from live stream and pre-recorded lectures might be a bit more challenging, and it might take a bit of time to adjust to. So if you're finding that you're not able to grasp the material the same way that you were previously, you may want to consider preparing for your lectures ahead of time by previewing the content that will be covered in the lecture itself. And just a helpful hint, this one's also extremely important and helpful when you're doing in-person lectures as well. So ways to preview. To do this, you may consider reading the assigned textbook sections. And if you're running short on time, you can try a little trick called a picture walk. So a picture walk is when you read the titles, the subtitles, you look at all the pictures and their captions, you get familiar with the bolded text that might be living on the side of that page, you read the chapter summary and the chapter objectives. And the key to doing a picture walk is that you got to be curious throughout it. And so when you see a title nested underneath, a subtitle nested underneath the title, think about like, well, what would that relationship be? In your mind, what you're trying to do is you're trying to form a scaffold for which your learning can hang up upon when you're actually in that lecture. So if you're short on time, picture walks are great. You can also look through the online posted lecture notes if your professor is posting them. And if you don't have access to a textbook section or lecture notes, consider attempting the affiliated questions. And so this method would be called pre-testing. And you can find affiliated questions in your textbook, your problem set, past midterms, or even past exams. So this is you doing the questions before you even learn the content. And once again, it's to help your brain organize how this information could be possibly presented. And we know that previewing in these ways can improve your comprehension in the lecture content. So try them out. My fourth tip for you is to engage in your online classes. And I want to encourage you to try to do this in all the ways that you can. So some of the ways that you might want to try are during a lecture, put your phone on like airplane mode or do not disturb mode so that you won't get distracted by your notifications. And this is it's a lot harder to not get distracted in our home settings in this way. Continue to take notes. This might need some modification since you might have more windows or apps open on your desktop than you're used to. And maybe this could mean that you might need to switch to handwritten notes if you're finding it too complicated to switch between windows. You can also try something called retrieve taking. So retrieve taking is a twist on the traditional note taking, and where it's when you listen to a chunk of the lecture, and when there's like a natural pause, you would try to summarize what you just learned. And so the hard part with this is that sometimes I find students are often pausing the video, and it takes them like 2 hours to complete a 1 hour lecture. So I would just warn against actually pausing the video and take hold of those natural pauses to just write down and summarize what it is that you learned. Summarizing is key with this method just because you want to try to practice and exercise your retrieving skills. So retrieving skills is when you are retrieving the information from your own brain rather than the brain of your professor who's written it down on the slides. You want to make sure that you are able to exercise that type of skill of bringing it out of your own brain. Other ways to engage. So when a professor poses a question in your online lecture, consider the possible answers and try to engage with the content in that way. And you might not actually have to like write it down in the chat, though I'm sure that Jason Foster and the other folks on this in this lecture who are instructors would really appreciate if you did chat in those online features. But definitely, if you're unsure, you can always just make sure you're mulling over it in your own mind. Continue to participate in your online discussions as well. And now that you're working from home, it's not so easy to turn to the person next to you to seek clarification. So what you can do is you can try to simulate that experience. You can create small online discussion groups with your peers so that after you're watching a lecture or even during watching a lecture, you can quote unquote turn to them for those clarification pieces. In the same way, you can also try to create a shared document with a small group of friends where you are all together writing in a Google Doc your notes that you would be taking in class. And this might help to clarify some of those concepts and make you feel like you're actually in class with other folks next to you. This one might also help you to hold you and your peers accountable for attending lectures. My final point is to seek help when you need it. And so after class, when you're done with your lecture notes, be sure to just do a quick reread of your notes and check out and see if there's concepts that you're still unsure about. When you identify that there's something that needs more clarity, dive into those concepts using your textbooks and your online sources. And if you still need clarification, be sure to ask for help. Asking for help is a strength. Remember that. It shows that you're aware of what you know and also what you don't know. And by asking for help, you can learn how to grasp the difficult concepts and also overcome those challenging problems. You can consider utilizing like online forums and videos and asking classmates in your class discussion boards and also in your peer groups. Consider accessing Gears once again. They're up and running, both the EngSci version and the Core 8 version. Tutors are also really helpful, and you can also reach out to your instructors. Just remember that by asking questions, you might even be doing someone else in the class a favor because they probably are also looking for clarification as well. And definitely, some of your questions might not fall into the academic realm, but it's still important to ask these questions. So if you find that you're feeling less motivated or overwhelmed or nervous or upset, these are also great questions to reach out and ask them. For these, you might find your family, peers, my SSP, Good to Talk, Health and Wellness, your academic advisors, me, your learning strategist, or even the assistant registrar of scholarships and financial aid helpful. And we're all here to support you as you're transitioning into online learning and physical distancing as well. To book an appointment with academic advisors, the learning strategist, or even the Registrar of Scholarships and Financial Aid, you can do so still through the engineering advising portal. And if you don't see them listed there, if you're having a hard time with that, you can just send them an email, or a lot of our offices are still, our phone lines are still open, and our wonderful staff are taking these calls from their homes. And so that concludes my 5 tips. And so I'm open to answering any questions. And if you wanted to have a one-on-one appointment, you can definitely book with me through the engineering advising portal. So Jason, I'm gonna flip it back to you. Are there any questions that are popping up in the chat, or anything that the instructors want to add into this conversation? Yeah, definitely.
Foster, can you check the audio? It's not going through to Twitch, apparently.
So for all those night owls out there, what should you do? Well, I think there's going to be some things that we're not going to that aren't going to be able to change, right? Like our business hours are still going to remain the same, etc. So if you do find that you are more productive at different times, definitely utilize your resources at those times, and try to do that work. But I think that I don't have a clear-cut answer to say, yes, you should be like, yes, there's going to be resources for you at those times. Yeah, I don't know if I've answered that at all, but I think that if you know that you're most productive at those times, then for sure you might want to utilize those hours. But I would also say, like, try out other hours. I think that sometimes we think that we're most productive at really off hours. And sometimes it's just because we're really busy at some of the other ones, and we haven't had the time to explore what our productivity is at those times either. So if you know it, if you're for sure, you're like, yeah, this is my most productive time, I like to work at these times, then do it. I've had a number of appointments with students where we schedule things in together, and when I find that a student is most productive at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m., we harness that and we schedule things into that, and as well as try to figure out how do we work with the other things that are not so movable in their schedule. So if you're having a hard time scheduling, reach out to me. We can do this together. I've done it for a number of students in the past.
So I'll follow along. I think students are sort of saying depends. There seem to be some profs who are up at, if the student's up late until 4 in the morning and the prof is up early at 4 in the morning, then it all works. But I'll put on the table, this might be a time to be experimental in your learning styles, in your approach to learning, in your approach to your own sort of sleep habits. Commute times are basically gone. And so there's an opportunity to actually take active control of your learning, would be sort of my thought to the students. We have about 2 minutes. I am staring at the thing going bing. There's some comments about getting out and exercise, but I think that was already mentioned, the importance of doing so. So I think, given that we've been late the last 2 lectures, I'm going to say, in as much as people can, let's give Melissa, the usual applause and thank her very much for being here. I know you're doing another open session a little bit later. So we've got applause coming in. All right, folks, let's fill it. Fill Mattermost. Let's do this. As you've already seen, you know how to find Melissa. You know how to find us on the Praxis teaching team. Take some positives away from all that you accomplished on beta. Don't forget to vote on the future alerts. For those of you who are looking for a little bit more on the one pager, please check out the slides. There's some stuff at the end that we'll cover verbally on Monday, but you can take a look ahead. And with that, we will let you go before my computer announces 1400 hours. Take care, everybody, and have a good next lecture.
Bye.